Hey, deep divers. Today we're diving deep into the State of AI report for 2024. It is a monster of a document, jam-packed with insights, so buckle up.
Oh, it's a fascinating time to be watching this field. It's evolving so rapidly.
Absolutely. Let's start with the research, because there's a lot to unpack there. OpenAI's new model, O1, is really turning heads. They've shifted resources to inference compute, and, well, it's crushed the competition on reasoning benchmarks.
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable. What's fascinating about O1 is how it uses compute. So instead of focusing on pre-training or post-training, OpenAI is using it for inference, which means the model can actually reason through these complex prompts step by step, almost like a chain of thought.
Hmm.
And that unlocks the ability to solve, multi-layered math problems, science problems, coding problems, areas where traditionally LLMs have really struggled because they're just sort of predicting the next token.
So it's not just about making bigger models anymore. It's about using compute more strategically.
Exactly, exactly. And speaking of massive models, Meta's Llama 3 is really pushing boundaries here. They used 15 trillion tokens for training.
Wow.
Yeah, well beyond the chinchilla optimal parameters we've been talking about.
Oh, yeah, I remember those chinchilla parameters, definitely.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that Meta didn't just throw more data at the problem. They found that increasing training compute actually improved model performance,
Right.
log linearly, which is, quite remarkable. So it wasn't just brute force, it was smarter.
Hmm. It's getting really interesting now because multimodal LLMs are becoming more and more important. It's not just about text anymore. Meta's Llama 3.2 actually has vision capabilities. It can analyze images and understand visual content.
That opens up, a whole new world for AI, right?
Mhm.
We're starting to see systems that can understand both text and images. It's a huge step forward in how AI can interact with the world around it.
Now, there's a lot of talk about model collapse. It's this concern that synthetic data could actually degrade model performance over time.
Yeah, it's a real worry. There was a Nature paper that came out from Oxford and Cambridge researchers,
Yeah.
and they found that this model collapse actually occurs across a variety of different AI architectures. So essentially, as models are trained on more and more synthetic data, the quality of that data can degrade. That hurts performance. This creates a sort of first mover advantage where access to diverse human-generated data becomes crucial for maintaining the quality of these models.
So does that mean we're doomed to, AI models with diminishing returns?
Not necessarily. The team over at Hugging Face has built this massive 15 trillion token dataset called FineWeb, and they've done this using real web data.
Okay.
And the LLMs that they produce using this dataset actually outperform those trained on other datasets, even when those datasets include a mix of real and synthetic data. So it seems like real-world data is still king.
So the key takeaway here is that data quality matters. Just because we can generate synthetic data easily now doesn't mean it's a good substitute for the real thing.
Exactly. And this sort of highlights a broader trend that we're seeing in AI research. There's a big focus now on smarter training methods and better data curation, not just building bigger models.
Yeah, makes sense. We need to think long term about the health of these models, not just the short term performance gains. So, what are some of the other key takeaways from the research section of the report?
Well, we're seeing a lot of interesting work on making models more efficient, like shrinking their size without actually sacrificing performance, which is huge.
Yeah.
And there's also been a lot of focus on improving how we evaluate these models because, traditional benchmarks, they can sometimes be misleading.
It sounds like the AI research landscape is incredibly dynamic. It's not just about building the biggest model anymore, it's about making AI more accessible, more reliable, and ultimately more aligned with human values.
Absolutely. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other fascinating research directions, from things like biological models of intelligence to, foundation models for the mind. It's a really, really exciting time to be involved in this field. It really does sound it. Okay, we've gotten a taste of the research now, so let's move on to the industry side of things.
Yeah.
Everyone's been saying NVIDIA is dominating the AI hardware market. Is that still the case?
Oh, absolutely. It's still the case. NVIDIA's market cap actually hit a staggering $3 trillion in June.
3 trillion.
3 trillion.
Wow.
It's mind-boggling. That makes them only the third U.S. company to ever reach that milestone.
Hmm.
You've got Microsoft and Apple and now NVIDIA. They're still the dominant force in AI hardware, even with competitors like AMD and Intel trying to catch up.
So is it still all about CPUs and GPUs?
Well, not just CPUs and GPUs anymore. We're seeing a lot of innovation in specialized hardware. Meta, for example, just unveiled the second generation of its in-house AI inference accelerator.
Okay.
And this new chip is a beast, you know? It more than doubles the compute and memory bandwidth of its predecessor.
Wow, that's a big statement. It shows that these big tech companies are really serious about competing with NVIDIA in this space. They are. And it's not just big tech. We're even seeing governments getting involved. The UAE government, for example, is reportedly in talks with Sam Altman about a multi-trillion-dollar initiative to boost chip production.
Multi-trillion.
Multi-trillion, yeah.
Wow. This whole AI chip arms race is a fascinating story, and the compute index in the report really gives us a clear picture of how things are shaping up. So from your perspective, what's the current state of this arms race?
Well, it's a race to build the most powerful AI chips. Yeah. And that race is going to have a huge impact on the future of AI. NVIDIA is still in the lead for sure, but we are seeing some challengers emerge. Cerebras, for instance, a company known for its wafer-scale engine, just filed to go public.
Cerebras, that's the company that puts an entire supercomputer on a single chip.
That's the one, and they're seeing massive revenue growth, much of it coming from Abu Dhabi, actually. And then you have SoftBank, who are making a big bet on AI chips. They've tasked their subsidiary, Arm, with launching its first AI chips in 2025, and they've also acquired the UK startup, Graphcore.
Okay, so it sounds like the AI hardware landscape is becoming more diverse. That's interesting. But what about access to these chips? Aren't there restrictions on selling the most advanced AI chips to certain countries, like China, for instance?
You're right. The U.S. has implemented export controls on AI chips and technology to China. And this has led to a sort of cat-and-mouse game where chip manufacturers are trying to find ways to stay within the rules while still selling to Chinese customers.
So how are Chinese companies getting around these restrictions?
Well, one way is by using intermediary dealers in countries that aren't subject to the same export controls. So there's this growing number of large NVIDIA chip sales to Chinese end customers, but they're going through deals in places like Malaysia, Hong Kong, Japan.
Interesting. So even with these controls in place, there's still a flow of AI hardware to China, but this hardware is essential for training the latest AI models. So are these export controls actually slowing down AI development in China?
That's a complicated question. While Chinese labs definitely face these restrictions on their ability to import the most advanced hardware, they can still access it through other means. For example, they can run access to NVIDIA H100s through cloud providers like Oracle in the US.
Yeah.
And there are even reports that companies like Alibaba and Tencent are in talks with NVIDIA about setting up their own US-based data centers.
Okay, so it seems like these export controls are creating some obstacles, but they haven't completely cut off China's access to AI hardware. So what are the long-term implications of this? I mean, some people are calling it a chip war, right?
Yeah, this is a major point of tension in the global AI landscape, and it's likely to have a really significant impact on how AI development unfolds around the world. Some experts believe that it could lead to a bifurcation of the AI industry, with the US and China developing their own separate AI ecosystems.
A sort of AI Iron Curtain.
Exactly. But even with all that said, it's important to note that China is also pushing hard to develop its own domestic chip-making capabilities.
Right. Are they able to produce their own advanced AI chips?
There have been some efforts, but they've faced some real challenges, particularly with quality and performance, even with, generous government subsidies. For example, Huawei made a big splash with its Ascend 910B chip, which, on paper, was a near match for the NVIDIA A100.
Okay.
But they've reportedly had real problems manufacturing these chips at scale. So for the moment, it seems like NVIDIA is still the king of the AI chip hill.
Yeah.
But the competition is heating up. Big tech companies, governments, even startups, they're all vying for a piece of this incredibly valuable pie. It's definitely a story we'll be following very closely in the coming months and years.
Absolutely. Now, all this talk about, these powerful AI chips and these massive models, it brings up an important question. What about the cost of all this computation? It can't be cheap to train and run these systems.
No, it's incredibly energy intense.
And it must have a significant environmental impact as well.
You're absolutely right. The environmental impact of AI is a growing concern. Big tech companies have made all these commitments to reduce their carbon footprints. But the increasing energy consumption of AI is, frankly, pushing them in the wrong direction.
So what are these companies doing to try to address this?
They're trying various approaches, from using more efficient hardware to exploring alternative energy sources. Microsoft, for instance, is reportedly planning to buy all of the output of the revived Three Mile Island nuclear plant to
Wow.
power its data centers.
That's a bold move. But this energy demand is only going to increase as AI models get even bigger and more complex. So, are we heading towards an energy crisis in the AI world?
It's a real possibility.
Hmm.
Some experts believe that we'll need data centers powered by gigawatts of electricity, comparable to large nuclear power plants, to support the exponential growth of AI. And the existing energy infrastructure may simply not be able to handle that kind of demand.
So, this isn't just an environmental issue, then, it's also a potential bottleneck for the future of AI.
Exactly. If we want to keep pushing the boundaries of AI, we need to find sustainable solutions to power these increasingly demanding systems.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the financial side of the AI industry. We've heard a lot about massive investments in AI companies. So, what are the latest trends in AI funding, according to the report?
Well, according to the report, investment in AI is absolutely surging. We're talking close to $100 billion invested globally last year.
$100 billion. Wow. What's driving all of this investment?
A lot of it is being driven by these mega rounds, especially in the US, with companies like xAI and OpenAI raising billions of dollars in funding.
Yeah, those are some eye-popping numbers. It seems like a good time to be an AI startup then.
It's a very good time to be an AI startup. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of optimism in the market right now. Investors are really eager to get in on what they see as a truly transformative technology.
But are these companies actually making any money yet?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Many generative AI startups are raising money based on these incredibly high revenue multiples, sometimes in the triple digits.
Triple digits?
Triple digits. So investors clearly have a lot of faith in their future potential,
They must.
but it does set a very high bar for these companies to meet. The pressure is definitely on to deliver.
For sure. What about the bigger, more established players in the AI space? So, companies like OpenAI and Google DeepMind, are they making money from their models?
The bigger players are starting to see their revenue ramp up as they move from simply building models to actually designing products and services around those models. OpenAI, for example, makes money from its API, which allows developers to access its models for a fee. And then, of course, there's their ChatGPT Plus subscription service, which is also bringing in revenue.
Right, so the business of AI is starting to take shape.
It is.
But it's still early days.
It's still very early days. The AI industry is still really in its formative stages. We're going to see a lot of experimentation, a lot of innovation in the coming years. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
It certainly will. Now, the report highlights several sectors where AI is really starting to make its mark. One of those is self-driving cars. Are we any closer to seeing fully autonomous vehicles on our roads?
We're seeing steady progress in self-driving technology. Companies like Waymo and Wave are making some really interesting strides. Waymo, for example, has been expanding its operations in cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. They've even abolished their waiting list in San Francisco, opening up the service to anyone who wants to try it.
Wow. So they're pretty confident in their technology then.
They seem to be. Wave is taking a slightly different approach. They're focusing on a camera-first approach and using end-to-end deep learning to train their models. And they're also working on this really interesting idea of integrating language models into their self-driving system, allowing the cars to actually generate real-time driving commentary.
So it's not just about perceiving the environment anymore. It's about actually understanding and explaining the driving process in a way that humans can understand.
Exactly. And that could be key in building trust and acceptance of self-driving technology. If people can understand how the car is making decisions, they're more likely to feel comfortable riding in it.
That makes sense. There have been some setbacks in the self-driving world, though, right? What about Cruise? I know they've been in the news recently.
Yeah, unfortunately, Cruise had a pretty major setback last year when one of its vehicles struck a pedestrian in San Francisco.
Oh, right.
They ended up losing their license to operate in California for a while, and there was a lot of leadership turnover. It was a difficult time for the company.
Yeah,
And it's a reminder that, self-driving is still a very complex and risky endeavor. Safety has to remain the absolute top priority.
it really does. It sounds like the self-driving industry is navigating a very complex landscape with a lot of excitement, a lot of potential, but also some very real challenges that still need to be overcome.
I think that's a fair assessment. It's a classic case of managing expectations. We're still in the relatively early days of self-driving technology, and it's important to be realistic about the timelines and the potential risks involved.
Absolutely. Now, let's move on to robotics. We've seen some really impressive demos from companies like Boston Dynamics over the years, robots doing backflips and all sorts of crazy things. But are robots actually being used in any real-world applications yet?
They are. Robots are starting to make their way into a variety of industries, from manufacturing and logistics to healthcare and even retail. There's a lot of interest right now in robots that can collaborate with humans, assisting with tasks that are dangerous, repetitive, or require a really high level of precision.
So it's not just about replacing human workers then, it's more about augmenting their capabilities.
Exactly. Robots can take on those tasks that are physically demanding or hazardous for humans, freeing up human workers to focus on more complex or creative endeavors.
That makes sense. What about those humanoid robots we keep seeing in those flashy demos? You know, the ones that look like they just walked off the set of a science fiction film. Are those going to be a part of our everyday lives anytime soon?
While those humanoid robots are certainly impressive, their real-world applications are still fairly limited. There are challenges in terms of cost, complexity, and, again, safety.
And it's not clear those humanoid robots are the most efficient solution for many tasks anyway.
That's right. For many industrial applications, a more specialized robot design is going to be more practical and more cost-effective.
Okay, so while we might not have humanoid robots serving us coffee anytime soon, it sounds like robotics is a field with a lot of potential for real-world impact in the years to come.
Definitely. Robotics is definitely a key area to watch as AI-powered robots become increasingly sophisticated and capable.
Now, let's talk about AI in healthcare. This is a field with enormous potential to improve patient care and accelerate medical research. So, what are some of the most promising applications of AI in healthcare from your perspective?
AI is being used in healthcare in so many different ways. Yeah. It's really quite incredible. We're seeing it used to diagnose diseases, to develop new treatments, to personalize patient care, even to improve the operational efficiency of hospitals and clinics. It's really quite remarkable.
Well, it's not just about one specific area, it's about transforming the entire healthcare system using AI.
Exactly. AI has the potential to completely revolutionize how we approach healthcare, making it more precise, more efficient, and importantly, more accessible to everyone.
What are some specific examples of how AI is being used in healthcare today?
Well, one area where AI is showing a lot of promise is in medical imaging. AI algorithms can analyze medical images, things like X-rays, CT scans, MRIs, and they can help doctors detect diseases earlier and with greater accuracy.
So the AI acts as a sort of second pair of eyes for the doctors.
Exactly. And this can be especially helpful in cases where the diagnosis is really complex or where the disease is in its very early stages and might not be easily detectable by the human eye.
That's incredible. What about AI in drug discovery? I know we've heard a lot about how AI is being used to develop new drugs and therapies for a range of different diseases.
That's another incredibly exciting area. AI can analyze these vast data sets of biological information, looking for patterns and connections that humans might miss. And they can use this information to identify promising drug targets and even to design new molecules that could potentially treat those diseases. And this has the potential to significantly accelerate the drug discovery process, which has traditionally been very long and very expensive.
So AI could help us find cures for diseases that have been elusive for years, if not decades.
That's the hope. And there are already some really promising results. For example, AI has been used to design new antibiotics that are effective against drug-resistant bacteria, which is a huge problem right now.
That's incredible. It really sounds like AI is already having a tangible impact on healthcare.
Absolutely. AI is transforming healthcare in really profound ways, and we're really only just beginning to see the full extent of its potential. It's a field that will continue to be at the very forefront of AI innovation for many years to come.
It certainly seems that way. Now, in our last few minutes, let's turn to the rise of AI-powered assistants, particularly voice assistants like Alexa and Siri. Are these assistants finally becoming more intelligent, more useful in our everyday lives?
We're definitely seeing a shift in the voice assistant landscape. With the emergence of new, more capable assistants powered by the latest AI technology, we're seeing some really interesting things.
Like what? What kind of things?
Well, OpenAI's GPT-4o, for instance,
Great.
and Paris-based Qtai's Mochi. These
Yeah.
are two great examples of these next-generation assistants that are really pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
And what makes these assistants different from the ones that we're used to interacting with?
These new assistants are able to actually think and speak at the same time, creating a much more natural and fluid conversation flow. And they're also much better at understanding complex requests and generating human-like responses.
So they're becoming more engaging, less robotic in their interactions.
Exactly. And this could lead to a much wider adoption of voice assistants for all sorts of tasks, from simple things like scheduling appointments and making reservations, to more complex things like controlling our smart home devices and even providing companionship.
Right, but are these assistants truly intelligent? I mean, can they really understand our needs, our intentions on a deeper level?
That's a question that's still being debated. While these assistants are incredibly impressive in their abilities, they are still limited by the data they're trained on and the algorithms that power them.
So it's important to remember that these assistants are still machines,
Yes,
and they don't possess the same kind of general intelligence that we humans do.
exactly. While they can be incredibly useful tools, it's important to have realistic expectations about their capabilities.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, the report makes some predictions for the next 12 months in the AI world. What can we expect to see?
Well, one prediction that jumped out at me was the expectation of a major investment from a sovereign state into a U.S. large AI lab.
Really?
Yeah, and this is likely to trigger a national security review as governments become increasingly aware of the potential risks and benefits of AI.
So are we going to be seeing more AI regulations coming down the pipeline?
Definitely. We could expect to see some changes to data collection practices, especially in response to those cases of AI misuse that are now starting to reach trial.
What about the technology itself? Any big breakthroughs on the horizon?
Well, the report predicts that we can expect to see open source alternatives to OpenAI's O1 actually surpassing its performance across those reasoning benchmarks.
Oh, wow.
And that's a really interesting sign of the increasing competition in the AI space.
It really
We're
is.
seeing more and more open source AI projects emerging, which is great for the field.
That's excellent news. And finally, what about AI-powered products hitting the market? Any particular sectors to watch?
We're going to see a lot more AI-powered games coming out in the next year. It's going to be really interesting to see how AI changes the way we interact with video games.
It certainly seems like the world of AI is anything but static. There's so much happening, and it's evolving at an incredible pace.
It really is an exciting time to be following this field.
It really is. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the State of AI Report 2024.
It was a pleasure as always.
It's a lot to digest, but hopefully this has given you some valuable insights into the current state of AI. Until next time, keep diving deep.